This is an incident that happened to me when I was a little girl, about 6, and I haven't told anyone. I grew up in a very small town in Tennessee with a population of about 7,000, and everyone knows everyone. I had a friend named Tommy that lived about a half a mile away from my house, and we hung out often. I thought I was a big girl and always wanted to walk or ride my bike to Tommy's house by myself and play. Looking back on it now, I don't know what the hell my mom was thinking, letting a small girl do that. But she obliged one day, and I started walking to his house. "Be back before the streetlights come on," she would always say. Once I got there and knocked on the door, his mom told me that he was visiting his father for the weekend and I should come back another day. Saddened, I left and headed back to my house. While walking, I heard a truck driving up from behind, so naturally I moved more to the side of the road so I wouldn't get hit. But this truck slowed down, almost to a crawl beside me. In the truck was a middle-aged couple that I had never met before. The woman leaned out of the window and asked if I needed a ride home. I said, "No, I'm almost home, but thank you," and kept walking. Then she said, "I have some tasty candy in here you can eat. You know that you would like some." When she said that, the repeated shrill of my mother's voice lecturing me about stranger danger kicked in, and I decided to stop talking and started walking faster. But the truck just sped up to my pace. The woman went further and said, "There's a new puppy in it for you, if you would just get in the damn truck." As soon as I heard that, my adrenaline went full force and I started running for my life. I ran through yards, in between houses, through muddy ditches, trying to make a beeline towards my house. I was crying and screaming, all while running. But no one seemed to come out of their house. The whole time I was running, I could hear the truck turning down roads looking for me. And at one point, I had to hide behind a tree while the truck passed by. As soon as I got to my street, I saw the truck drive past, not even turning, even though I knew they saw me at that point. It made me feel like they knew where I lived, and they may have been watching me for my regular trips to Tommy's house. It was strange, and even growing up in the same house in the same town until I was 19, I never saw that couple or their truck again after that day. Every now and again, I wonder to myself what would have happened if I had gotten in that truck. I'm glad I remembered my mother's words, and I hope I never meet that couple again. Here's some backstory first. I'm a 25-year-old male, and I reside in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work at the postal office, and in short, I'm a mailman. This whole encounter has been happening for weeks and finally boiled over a few days ago. I'll just describe my job duties for another quick backstory. I'm responsible for delivering mail to many houses, about 17 blocks full of homes. Depending on when I finish with delivering mail, I get to finish my day early. During the time I started delivering around 4 p.m., and since it was around the winter time, it became dark around 5. Now for the story. Go back to February 2016. I was doing my normal routine. About 5 blocks into work, I delivered mail to this creepy-looking house. It was the first time that this house had mail for me to deliver. Just entering the yard gave me a chill. Since I listen to many stories online and watch movies, I become paranoid, like Michael Myers was watching me from the window. Oh, and I should mention that there are no mailboxes. There's just some type of small hole in the front door. I just open it and drop the mail in there. But if it was something bigger that I can't fit, I was supposed to ring the bell first, and if no one was home, I would just leave it behind a bush in the front yard and leave a note. Sadly for me, this was a small package that I had to ring the bell for. I rang the bell. I was scared, but at the same time, curious to see who lived in this house. I rang the bell again. No answer. As I was getting out my sticky note, I hear a voice from inside. "Is that for me?" I calmly said, "Yes, I have a package for Philip Nance." Then the guy inside said, "Okay, I'll be right out." At that point, he sounded like a normal guy. But when he came out, I will never forget the image I saw. This was a 40-ish-year-old man with no pants, and he had on a girl's shirt, and his penis was on full display, and he was stroking it in front of me. I had no idea what to do at this point, so I just gave him a quick, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" He had the biggest ugly smile on his face that I still can't get out of my head. I just dropped his package on the floor and got the fuck out of there. His house was at the end of the block, and I was lucky enough to have to cross the long street to get away from his house. As soon as I finished work for that day, I got home and just ignored everything because I was really tired. I was at work again, and I get the papers that I'm supposed to deliver that day. I quickly checked through all the addresses to see if I had to stop by this fucking creep's house. He did have mail for that day, and in my head, I promised myself that if he did anything dumb or creepy again, I would have to call the police right there. When I got to the house, I see this fucking guy sitting by the front door. As soon as he sees me, he says, "You're late." I ignored him and just came up to him and handed him his mail. That moment I was ready to fight if he tried anything stupid. As soon as I left, he said, "See you on Monday." It was Saturday that this happened, and no mail was delivered on Sundays. So here comes Monday, and again, I had to deliver mail to this creepy fuck. This time, when I arrived, he wasn't in the front yard, and lucky for me, I just had one piece of mail that I could just slip in his front door and then run. As soon as I opened his mail slot, the door quickly opens, and again, he's there jacking off in front of me. At this point, I was more angry than scared. I was tired, and I didn't have time for this. I shouted at him, "What the fuck are you doing, you fuck?" Then he said, "Nothing. Why? Do you want to join me?" I told him to fuck off and that I will be calling the police. I did call the police, but after my shift, because it was still my duty to deliver on time. When the police came to my house, I explained everything to them. The following day, my boss gave me off, and they would let someone else deliver that day, and to not go to that house, even if he had mail. The police then called me into the station and told me that there was no Philip Nance living in that area, and the home belonged to someone else. When the guy came back from a business trip with his wife the following week, they claimed that there should have been no one in the house, and they thanked me for calling the police, because that naked fuck should not have been there in the first place. None of this still makes sense to me, and I don't get why he was in that house, waiting for the mailman to come and jack off in front of them. A few weeks went by, and I was on my normal routine. But this time, when I passed by there, police cars were parked outside. When I asked one of the neighbors from across the street what happened, they told me that the homeowners were attacked and taken to the hospital. It wasn't until the following day that I found out that the creepy fuck was a perverted home invader. And he's been following this couple for a while, and he knew that they were going out of town. I guess he was staying there while the homeowners were gone. The thing I still don't understand is why he was having mail sent to this house with his name on it. I also forgot to mention his packages had no return address on them. Being a postal worker, I have no idea how the packages were sent with no return address. Turns out the creepy fuck was shot by the homeowner during the attack, and he was wounded, but unfortunately lived. He was arrested, and hopefully he's rotting behind bars now. Months later, I'm back doing my normal routine, and no more weird shit happened. I've spoken to the attacked couple, and they told me that they were doing good and recovering. They told me that sick fuck would have probably tried to hurt me, and I was smart to have called the police. I thanked them again, and finally got to meet the person behind this creepy house. Turns out they're some kind of business people. Him and his wife are always going on business trips, which explains why their house looks like shit. I am a 17-year-old female, and this happened to me this past summer. It was a weekend in July, when I went to stay at my boyfriend's house in Rochester, New York. Since I lived an hour away in Buffalo, and we rarely ever saw each other, our relationship was falling apart. We both saw other people, and both knew about it, but if we spoke of the people that we had been hanging out with, one of us would get mad at the other for cheating. It was complicated, and honestly, I was tired of driving illegally every weekend to my boyfriend's house, since I only had a permit. Anyway, my boyfriend Scott had invited me to a carnival that he was going to with his friends. I agreed since I hadn't seen him all week. I drove the hour to his house where I picked him up, then drove him to his buddies Chris and Ron's house to pick them up with their girlfriends. With all 6 of us packed into my mom's old 1996 Volvo, we drove the half hour to the carnival. My boyfriend had barely talked to me since I picked him up, and even let Ron sit next to me in the front seat, while he sat in the back cracking jokes and laughing. I was beyond pissed by the time we parked, paid, and stepped foot into the carnival. After a couple of rides, I excused myself to the bathroom, even though no one would notice that I was gone. When I finally located the bathrooms, I went inside and did my thing before coming back out, pulling out my phone to text my boyfriend and ask him where they were. When I waited for 10 minutes in front of the bathrooms, with no reply, I took a seat on a bench and started to feel really depressed and tired. After a couple of minutes of feeling like a piece of garbage, a young guy in his early 20s took a seat next to me. He was cute with blonde hair that hung down over his big blue eyes. A little too big, but the size of his muscles made up for it. Now before I continue, I'm going to try to let you know how sad I was at that moment. I was at a carnival with my boyfriend, who wasn't interested in us anymore. It was getting late. I was hungry, and I had left most of my money with my boyfriend. I felt like I had cinder blocks on my shoulders, weighing me down to that dumb cold bench. So after the guy who introduced himself as Joe asked me, quote unquote, if a lovely doll like me was alright, we talked for a while. We ended up stealing a pizza from behind a concession stand and making out. Scott and I did this kind of thing all the time, and it wasn't like we led the other person on. We had to tell him that our relationship was open, meaning that we could see other people without any strings attached. That's why when we were done kissing and Joe asked me if I had plans the following day, I was quite taken aback. He had been sitting down with his legs straight out in front of him, his back leaning against the small stand. I was on top of him with my knees on either side. I told him again that I had a boyfriend and started to stand up, when he grabbed my elbow and pulled me back down. I was shocked, and I stared at his hand holding me down for what seemed like forever, before I pulled out of his grasp and stumbled away. After half walking, half running to where I believed was a safe distance, I texted my boyfriend again, and this time he replied, telling me where the group was. I made my way to their location quickly, and then regrouped and hit a few rides, and the incident with Joe was faded from my mind, until I got off the 3rd ride and saw him waiting there, near the exit gate. I walked right by him without meeting his gaze, and hurried after my boyfriend. This happened many times throughout the rest of our time there. I would see him standing nonchalantly by the exit to every ride that I would get off of, or he would be trailing slowly behind us as we walked to the next attraction. It was probably around 10:30ish when we all decided to go home. I still had an hour drive after I dropped everyone off. At about 12:30, I turned onto the interstate to drive back to Buffalo. When the car behind me flickered their lights, I couldn't see the driver as their brights were on, but I could feel a chill run up my spine. I didn't want to stop. I still had an hour drive in pitch black darkness all by myself, and I was already so tired. But I thought that maybe I had a broken tail light, and the thought of getting pulled over without my license so far from home scared me even more than the fear of a complete stranger waving me down. I pulled over, and so did the other car. I watched as the driver door opened and closed, and a person got out of the car and started walking towards me. I locked all the doors and cracked my window a tiny bit. My heart stopped beating when the big blue-eyed Joe leaned down and peered into my window. He said something about this being such a coincidence, but I didn't really stick around to listen. I floored it, nearly running over his toes, and thankfully, he didn't give chase. The whole rest of the ride home, I found myself checking my rearview mirror constantly. I was shaking so violently and breathing heavily. That creepy obsessed guy had followed me to 3 different locations and waited until I was alone to do whatever he had planned. I'm just happy I never found out what he wanted. Hopefully I'll never see him again. I'm still dating Scott and driving the distance to Rochester every weekend. And if by any chance, no matter how slim, that stalker Joe is listening right now, fuck you. Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget, there's always a reason to be afraid.